In today's show, how did 15 NBA teams pass on Yang Hansen in the NBA draft? Or it's time to react to some overreactions. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, an episode inspired by a wonderful email I got this afternoon, or maybe the morning. It's like 11 a.m. An email I got this morning from a listener who asked a sort of simple, but I think very broad and large question that kind of got my gears rolling a little bit about the sort of topic du jour for the Blazers. The question is, how did 15 teams pass on Yang Hansen? How did so many teams miss on this dude? And I want to unpack all of that because I think that question kind of speaks to where everyone's at as sort of the larger Blazer fan base, and like the sort of nature of Summer League and all of the fun stuff that we have seen so far. We will get into all of that and unpack it. It is Hansen Mania, all things Hansen all the time. That's what we're doing on the program. Part of it is just sort of the nature of this time of year, the nature of who the Blazers send to Summer League. They just never send second-year guys because they treat Summer League like punishment or something. But I also like, this to me, this is the most, while I am hammering a lot of this and recognize it, I think this is the most intriguing part about the Blazers right now. So I got this question today from listener. They signed their email E-little-T-D, so ETD. But the way my email service works, I saw their name, but I don't think they want me to share their name. So I'm going to say ETD. Listener ETD asks, and this is going to kind of spawn the whole episode, but I want to set the stage here. Listener ETD asks, after watching 2 games of Yang Hansen, I am curious how other teams could have missed on him. I know the Trailblazers scouted him heavily over a couple years, but how did so many other NBA teams just miss on his talent? Then there's a couple other paragraphs and then the sentence I like. At this point, 16 doesn't seem like a reach. It seems too low. That's right. Not only was Hansen the selection at 16 too low, was not too low in the draft, other teams should have jumped up higher to take him. That's what listener ETD suggests. I think the answer to this is what I started writing in my notes as twofold. It's twofold. Let me make a couple bullet points. It's like, there's a lot more folds than that. There's several folds. I want to address it from 2 directions. First, I think, is the very simple one. This is like the most simple response to this type of question. It's just too early to take a victory lap. It is not too early to enjoy the Hansen experience. It is not too early to bask in the splendor of a dude his size with the feel and passing skills that he has, and kind of like some of the off the dribble interesting game to get into, like to attack from the top of the key, both off the bounce and as a passer, like someone who has this kind of unique skill sets. Like, it is not too early to appreciate his talent. But I do think it is simply too early to take it's not too early to appreciate Hansen's potential. It's not too early to appreciate like how fun he has been in those first 2 Summer League games. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it is too early to take a victory lap relative to other draftees. And what I mean by that is, like, he was taken 16th, and to like look at him play and be like, well, this dude should have gone way higher is like, maybe, right? But I think choosing to do that in the middle of July and judging his career relative to the 15 gentlemen selected before him is just probably a fool's errand, right? It's probably even if you say like, okay, well, not Cooper Flagg, but everybody else, right? It's like, yeah, I bet he, there's a safe bet he will be, there'll be someone who goes in the first 15 picks ahead of him who just like is not an NBA player. He's just like not an NBA dude. That's just kind of how it works in every year in the draft. So like, yeah, maybe you'll be able to point to someone very clearly as soon as 2 seasons into the Hansen experience and say like, haha, gotcha. But I would say in general, it's like it is a safer move to appreciate Hansen in a smaller, more contained space than vis-a-vis other NBA teams' choices. Because first of all, comparison is a thief of joy, and second of all, it's just we're just so early into this. I will say it does seem like don't overreact is something that people apply to summer league unless the player plays well. If a guy struggles, they're like, now, let's not overreact. Everyone has bad games in summer league. It's okay. But if someone plays well, myself included, right? Like Hansen had a really nice debut, like a really fun, intriguing, like exciting debut. And I was like, shoot, I'm going to record a bonus episode and like, and overreact a little bit. The title of the episode was something along the lines of "Let's overreact to one game," right? Like I am joining you in this boat, right? I'm not holier than thou. I'm saying like this is just kind of the nature of us, the way we watch sports, the basketball fans in general. I do think we've seen enough of Hansen to know a couple things. He's really stinking big and he's really skilled. He also is going to have some challenges in the NBA, right? Like against NBA level competition. I think lateral quickness, while it hasn't showed up much in summer league yet, there's been a few moments where it's just been like whoop, and somebody beats him, and he's a little jumpy on pump fakes. But like I think against high level NBA guards, right? Like I think we just haven't seen him play anyone who's Jalen Wells is a pretty good small forward-ish guy who they hope can play shooting guard this year. But lateral quickness, I think defensive positioning, and just getting stronger, physically stronger, and getting his certainly getting in better shape. Some of those challenges are just very normal for a 20-year-old rookie, right? It's like, yeah, he's 20 years old. Of course, he has some defensive, like positional stuff where it's just like he's close, he's kind of in the right spot, but he's not there. He's not all the way. He needs to be a half a step further, or it's like he's just reacting a little bit late because he's trying to read too many things. Like, yeah, defensive positioning usually like comfort, feel, your positioning gets better. Maybe not your overall like defensive acumen. Obviously, some guys are just bad on defense. I'm not sure Hansen's ever going to be an elite defender, but certainly like big dudes who are smart can be good defenders fairly easily. And defensive positioning is something you get with time. Strength is something you can get with time. Like it's like. Some of the stuff is just like the nature of being, the nature of making this transition from a teenager playing in the CBA in China to a 20-year-old trying to find his footing in the league, right? Like some of that is just very believable natural progression. But some of the stuff is like just might be part of the whole experience. Some of his struggles, right? Like he hasn't shot very well from the outside, and the jumper doesn't look. He's shot totally okay from the free throw line, but it's like the jumper from 3 doesn't look great, and maybe the shooting touch will never. That won't be a thing. He could be plenty of centers are good without shooting threes. Just you pray every center shoots threes and block shots, but it's like it's just like the vast majority of centers in the league aren't that, right? There's a lot to like about his game. Frankly, I think like. Through 2 games, well, I think it's I would caution against like comparing your joy vis-a-vis other teams and other draft picks. I think he's been extremely entertaining. I just hesitate to like crown anyone anything after a couple NBA games because I've been doing this for a long time. I've been in the game for 10 years. I've watched a lot of Vegas basketball. I'm old enough to remember very well covering Caleb Swanigan's first team all rookie performance in summer league, his rookie season in 2017. I remember Jared Bayless' dominant 2008 summer. I just to say yes, this works and stamp it with a big old stamp seems a little too much for me. But I do think for Hansen, the baseline for success is there because of the size, because of the feel, and because there's also just like there are paths to him being a successful NBA player that aren't a star, right? There are because of the touch, the shooting touch. We haven't really seen it yet, but I do think he has that. We'll see if he can get stronger to like put that into effect. But in theory, and certainly I've watched a lot of his highlights, he has good shooting touch, like around the rim, has good touch around the rim. He's obviously a very gifted passer with some skill in his size. Like, size and feel and it's just sort of overall skill level, that's like a pretty good baseline, but then like there's this obvious development curve on the backside of that. I want to talk about the development curve, and then I want to actually answer this question. How did other teams pass on him? Because I kind of want to help set the stage here in the first segment, but how did other teams pass on him? How were the Blazers the team that pulled the trigger on this draft pick, and now the other teams, considering what we've seen from Hansen? Let's talk about that in the second segment. Join me there, won't ya? First, though, let us talk FanDuel. It's summertime, and summer sports are rolling along. Baseball's taking a little break, but we're going to have the All-Star game here coming up. We got golf out on the green. We got high-stakes footy out on the pitch. We got the WNBA. We got NBA Summer League, and FanDuel is the best way to make games more exciting. Add a little juice to the games you're already watching. You're a sports fan. You're listening to this podcast. You're already following the action, and FanDuel can give you a little something else to get into the game. So FanDuel is super easy to use. The app is super clean. It's when you win money, you get a fast payout, but also like you can track games on there, live play-by-play, live stats for dang near every sport you'd ever want to bet on. So whether you're building a same-game parlay, live betting sports, or watching a bet ride out to the very end of the game, why not get in on the action with FanDuel? And if you're new to FanDuel right now, new customers can bet $5. And if that $5 bet hits, you get $150 in bets, $150 in bonus bets to play with. So make a $5 bet you feel confident with, win it, and then you'll have $150 in bonus bets when your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right. So I mentioned the development curve, right? And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here with Hansen, right? We're talking about this, and I swear I'm going to answer this question at the end of the show, right? Or as we get along in the show. But like, I think the development curve is an important thing to consider when you're talking about young players, because like, I think we've seen obvious skills and obvious baseline for success and obvious talent, right? But then there's just some development stuff, right? Like there's things he has to get better at, right? He's 20 years old. He's 20 years old. From what he is now to what he can be at his peak, there's a path to walk, perhaps a curve to climb, and like the development curve for any young player is just so hard to judge. Some dudes sprint up the incline, right? They just fly up that developmental curve, and they're just so much better than you thought so quickly. And Hansen certainly has some skill stuff and in his physical package that make you think like, yeah, he does things other dudes like him can't do, right? And so you feel like, okay, he could be someone who sprints up the incline. But like other guys get stuck on the front side of the bell curve, and I don't know. Fill in the blank here with some joke about standard deviation. You figure it out, nerd. But like they just get lost on the development curve, right? They just don't make it to the other side. They end up somewhere in the sort of the beginning of that slope, and it's like, yeah, they didn't quite get there. There are like so many outcomes when you think about players that are like, I think we tend to think kind of binary with this stuff. Bust, star. But like the vast majority of guys are in between those two, right? Like most players aren't all-stars, and many players play in the league a while without ever sniffing an all-star game. So I think what you're thinking about with Hansen is like, how does the package go from what we've seen in very, 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 very little action to what he can be? And I think I feel comfortable saying like he's got a lot of stuff, a lot of tools, a lot of tools. But like why I'm hesitating and I'm kind of setting the stage and hedging here is because like tools to production is a tough road, tough curve. The other part, though, and I want to talk about here, is the actual answer to ETD's question. how other teams could have possibly missed on him. I like the language of missed because it's not passed. It's not chosen to not select. It's missed because it's Hansen is a winner and you've missed on him. The consensus draft range on the consensus draft service had Yang Hansen at 34 on draft night. I will say that most of the sort of larger services, Kevin Connor at Yahoo, Sam Vecini at the Athletic, even ESPN with Jonathan Gavoni and Jeremy Wu, John Wasserman at Bleacher Report, much deeper, right? Much deeper. They had him in the 40s, right? Hollinger had him in the 40s as well over at the Athletic. Like if Hansen had been taken 35th and he had this first couple days at Summer League, pretty friggin' exciting. But I will say, like, for a 16th pick, over the last 15 years, and I shared this with another listener today. Shout out to the email. Email me. That's where you find me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. Like, even 16th picks, like, there's just dudes flame out of the league. Like, even the last decade and a half of 16th picks, like, you're much, much more likely to not get a second NBA contract than you are to be an all-star. And that is true of nearly every pick in the draft. It just gets magnified as you get sort of further down the draft. So I think the NBA draft scouting world missed out on Hansen for a few reasons. One, he played in a foreign country. China's far away from the United States. Most of these people live in the U.S. Sam Vecini, I believe, lives in Australia. That's much closer to China, but still. He lives in a foreign country. He played in a league in the CBA that does not have a strong track record of churning out pros. It is not like these other leagues in Europe where it's like, well, shoot, you dominate in Turkey. You play pretty well in the Adriatic League. You play well in Spain. These are leagues that have, a strong history of kind of churning out at least like solid pros, if not out and out stars. And while Hansen was successful in the CBA at a young age, very successful at a young age, right? Like he was, as a teenager, was a good player in the CBA. He didn't have these like jump off the page type of stats that would make folks who hadn't watched him, say like people who run these big services or do this for a living, to say like, well, I got to get more eyes on him. They probably watched him in that U19 tournament against Alex Sarr. He played. Played against Australia in a Olympic tune-up. Like, he's had some international competition moments. Played at the Cali Classic last year, and you get eyes on him. You say, yeah. And then I also think there's just like a groupthink with draft stuff that sort of like coalesces around draft time. So when you're saying like, well, I'm going to rank all 60 prospects, and you have like a really good feel for say 28 of the prospects, even 40 of the prospects, but then you get a little bit deeper and you're like, oh, where does someone else have Yang Hansen? And there tends to be groupthink around this. So like when smart people start to say, yeah, I think he's like the 45th best player in the draft, then yeah, he ends up like that is kind of just the sort of nature of how NBA draft season works. Not every service though is out to like predict the order of the draft. Some people who are doing draft stuff are just like giving their opinions. Here's where I would rank a guy. Some folks are like actively trying to, particularly ESPN, actively trying to get it accurate, not just scout, but say like accurately predict. And even they were way off. That's the public stuff, right? So I think publicly, playing far away, playing in a league that hasn't churned out talent, not having the obvious statistical profile that says we need to learn more about this guy, kind of slips through the cracks in sort of the sort of larger public-facing media draft stuff. We don't really know where other teams had Hansen. We don't know on their draft board. That's generally impossible to know. It's pretty rare that afterwards, after someone gets drafted, a team that didn't draft him will say, well, we had him 9th or whatever. It's like, okay, what? Thank you for telling us that, Golden State Warriors. There's just like, what's the value in it, right? There's been some speculation that Minnesota liked him. I think that got really popular on Chinese social media, at least according to one listener who kind of explained the lore to me. But I will say, reading John Krasinski of The Athletic, he pretty thoroughly reported that Minnesota had a long-standing preference for Yohan Beranger, who they drafted at 17. Like that they had him in their top 10 and they scouted him heavily, and they had worked him out, and they were even considering trading up higher because they were worried that that Beranger was going to go before them. So like, you know how this stuff works. Like usually you get the lore gets built after a team drafts him. Oh, we loved him. So like maybe this is Krasinski. I think he's nails. So I'm not questioning that. But in terms of like how the stories often get made. So like I don't know if Minnesota. I think Minnesota at 17. I think that's mostly a myth, right? It doesn't mean other teams didn't like him. In fact, on draft night, Hansen told reporters in Brooklyn that he expected to be drafted in the 20s. And you know why I trust him? Because he was in the building. Another listener told me that in Qingdao, the Qingdao Eagles, invited fans to like a watch party to watch the first round of the NBA draft. There was a perception with his club in China. There was a perception with his representation, Clutch Sports, and also his Chinese handlers, that he was gonna go on draft night, opening night, the first night, not night 2. He was going to be a first round draft pick. That was his anticipation. That was his team's anticipation. He was in the building. He was dressed up. He was ready to go. There was like sorry, let me go back to the language. How other teams could have missed on him is not so much about missing. It's about their willingness to do what the Blazers did. Let's talk about that to close the show. Join me in that third segment. First, though, let's talk about Hungry Root. Look, life's busy. You got to do a whole bunch of stuff. And adding on top of the whole bunch of stuff, meal planning and grocery shopping, it can get overwhelming because you got a busy schedule. And maybe you also have picky eaters at home. Maybe you yourself are a picky eater and you're also trying to eat healthy. It's a lot. It's just a lot to juggle. And that's why Hungry Root can help. Take the stress out of planning by filling your cart with personalized groceries and meal options based on what you like and what you need. Hungry Root uses their smart cart TM technology to recommend groceries, recipes, and even supplements tailored to your preferences, whether you're dairy-free, gluten-free, focused on gut health, or just trying to eat better, more nutritious meals. Hungry Root's got you covered. You take a short quiz. They'll figure out what you like, what you don't like, your preferences, your health goals, all of those things, sort of your palate and your health goals, and they'll start recommending meals and snacks that you actually want. And it, like I said, it can really, really streamline stuff. So you're not wasting time walking around the grocery store trying to figure it all out, or more importantly, stressing over what's for dinner. Hungry Root will figure that out all for you. So take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, you get 40% off your first box plus a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. And the code is LockedOnNBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richman. You're still listening to Locked On Blazers. So I mentioned kind of the other teams. There's a lot of solid reporting out there, both speculative and like actual, boots on the ground. John Krasinski reporting from The Athletic, like that there's Hansen expected to go in the late round. It seems like the Brooklyn Nets, with their 5 first-round picks, if he'd been on the board, particularly for their later picks in the 20s, he'd be a Brooklyn Net. I think that seems pretty clear based on what we know. So how did the other teams miss on Hansen? ETD asks. I think the difference is the Blazers' risk appetite. They're willing to take this risk. It was higher than others. And they very well may be rewarded for that. I don't mean that inherently Yang Hansen in and of himself is a risk. The risk is sort of calling your shot. Now let's be a cajillion% clear. Trading back from 11 to 16 and getting an unprotected first round pick and 2 seconds, pretty much regardless of who you select, is good business. Outside of the draft selection, just that trade, like the construction of the trade itself for the Blazers, is very, very good business. It's a very, very good business. An unprotected future pick, Magic might be really good. That pick might stink, but whatever. You build the process, right? You build the process. The process of that trade construction is very good. But even if we say like, okay, Sure, Minnesota did have the picture of Hansen on their computer when it flashed to them on draft night, which is an insane thing to speculate about. Why would they have his picture on their computer? Because he was the last bleep taken in the draft. They're looking at him on their computer because he just got picked. But like, again, this kind of just like doesn't seem like that's real based on the reporting from John Krasinski of The Athletic. But let's say it is. Let's just throw it out. Let's say it is. What the Timberwolves were willing to do was take him at 17. The Blazers' risk appetite was higher. They were saying this is a guy who the sort of draft consensus world thinks is a later pick. And from what we can tell, other teams think he is a pick that they'd be willing to take in the 20s. Mind you, Brooklyn had the 8th pick in the draft, right? So like willing to take into the early 20s and late 20s. This is a guy who if the Blazers on draft night, Joe Cronin said that they traded down about as far back as they felt comfortable with, right? That was as far back. This was their guy, their absolute dude, a guy they scouted for 2 years, as pointed out by ETD at the top of the episode, right? They were, while maybe the sort of the draft intelligentsia didn't go to China, like the Blazers are $1 billion organization. They sent several people to China on several different trips, right? Like, so like they had a heavy scout on them. They felt like they probably scouted him better than any other team in the league, at least from what I understand. So like this was their guy. Hansen was their guy. He was the player that they thought was really that they really felt strongly was a player in the sort of range they were comfortable in making the first round selection, a player they were willing to stake their claim on. But they weren't willing to trade further back because they like their guy. And there's maybe some risk in saying like, this is absolutely our dude. And we're not going to let the board fall to us. We're going to chase the board a little bit. I think there's some risk there, but I think the trade in of itself is okay. I think the trade is enough to mitigate some of that risk. Other teams weren't willing to take that type of risk. They weren't willing to take that type of risk on a player he's not an unknown. I think that's a weird way to put it. He's unknown to us. A player who did not have as high a public profile, or a player that maybe the majority of NBA teams had at least a few slots further back than the teens. The Blazers were willing to make this risk, and they may well be rewarded for that risk. And as we wrap up here, I'll leave you with ETD's parting thoughts. At this point, 16 doesn't seem like a reach. It seems too low. All of that remains to be seen. I think the truth about how the Blazers did this is they cast a wide net in scouting. They trusted their first international scout that saw Hansen play. Then they sent their front office, their assistant GMs to go, finalize that scout and continue to sort of gain that data. And then on draft night, they determined what their risk preference was. This is the guy we absolutely want. How far can we trade back to maximize sort of trade package, but not end up with, say, the third guy on our board in the draft range, right? So many other teams, how did they miss? They weren't willing to do that level of calculation. What becomes of Hansen into the future is what I talked about to the whole first part of the show, right? There's just so many things to go from where we are in July to where he could be as this ultimate NBA ceiling, right? But the Blazers' willingness to, after they'd done the scout, to kind of say, we are not afraid to go against the consensus, and also but we are not willing to trade back to, like, again, say we trade back to 16, trade back, man, we're not willing to trade back a second time and stack more assets because this is absolutely our dude. That was their risk appetite. There was different than other teams, and I think that's the real truth. I'm excited to watch Hansen play again. I assume he will play at least one more game in Summer League. I'm hoping he plays 3 more. I hope he plays all 5. I'm very skeptical of him playing a 5th game, but hopefully we get 3 and 4, because so much of what we've seen so far is tools and like stuff. with some struggles along the way. I want to see more of those tools expand. I thought he had much more variety in his game 2 than he had in game 1. Stacking variety, doing things in different ways with the different, all of the feel and skill stuff he brings to the table, and the fact that he's a 7'2", 20-year-old. He's just so intriguing, and he's just been so dang fun. I am not going to sort of champion steal of the draft or anything like that. That's not the style of analyst or whatever I am, style of yapper that I am. But I will champion my supreme enjoyment of Hansen. I'm excited to watch him play basketball again. On that note, just like life scheduling thing with me, the Blazers play Tuesday night. You're listening to Tuesday, July 15th show. That I'm not going to be able to record that show tomorrow evening due to some life stuff. I will record it Wednesday morning Portland time. So it's going to be in your feed a little bit later, particularly if you live in other parts of the world. Listen, China's like 13 hours ahead. So it's hard to know exactly what time it is there, but I can do the US time zones pretty darn well. North American time zones pretty darn well. So like if you are a East Coast listener, it's not going to be in your feed first thing in the morning. It's going to be like an afternoon release for you. I'm probably going to record it around 8:30 on Wednesday morning. So look for that one in your feeds. But it is going to be a little bit late, just as a heads up. And if you made it this far in the episode, you get rewarded with knowing that it's a little bit late. That's going to do it for today's show. Tell your friends 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.